Red Bull.
Oh, gotta have Red Bull. Red Bull.
Gotta have Red Bull.
Red Bull.
Red Bull.
I think we should have a Red Bull.
I think we should have a couple Red Bulls.
We'll have a Red Bull.
Sponsored by...
Hopefully one day, Red Bull.
We're having a rep come from Red Bull. He's going to stock our fridge with Red Bull.
Or Monster. Red Bull or Monster.
We're going to have to get both reps. I got the rep from Red Bull coming in next week.
Oh, yeah. That would be fucking
It's
sweet.
half as much from the grocery store then. It's
then
half off.
And then I'm going to have Raycon come in as well and get their earbuds sold. All right. Well, hello out there, Podcast Nation. We decided to go live right now.
LIVE.
Yeah, that's right. This is the Recovery Atheist, and I am so happy.
So happy
that you've decided to join us today. All right, so we got an interesting topic. I think it's something that a lot of people are going to want to hear about. So let me just set it up here. I have, being an atheist, I get a lot of crap from Christians. That's just a normal thing I have to deal with, and I'm all good with that. That's part of what I do. But one of the biggest arguments they use when they hear that I'm an atheist is, well, how do you get your morals without God?
Morals without God.
So, almost like it gives me permission because I'm an atheist to just go out and rape and pillage and kill, just because I don't believe in a God, that the only way morality comes is from God. Now, we'll go into a lot on this subject, talking about it, but obviously there's many people that don't believe in a God that have morals.
100%.
And it's stupid. I'm just going to call people who say that stupid. I'm sorry. I mean, if you are being very ignorant if you think that people cannot have morals just because they don't believe in God. So here is the definition of morality, and I would like to point out that these definitions, even though the Christians talk about God being involved, the definitions have no word of God or a higher power in them.
Nope, none.
Okay, morality. Principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. It's also a particular system of values and of principles of conduct, especially one held by a specified person or a society. So I guess that could be religion. Or the extent to which an action is right or wrong.
So this is interesting because ultimately, if you look at fictional stories and you start to look at them, at the base of every society, because at the end there it says society, a particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specified person or society. Mm-hmm. Every society has money at the base of it. Just look at it. They have to have a currency. Money is a fictional story. Human rights correlate with morality and what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. And human rights, if you think about it, they are created by the people within the society. We decide, naturally, we come up with an idea. Like if you cut a human open, it says it in one of the articles I read about on human rights, there is nothing that shows you what a human right is. It is our society and collective unity and collaboration and intellectuality that we come together with our intellect and we come up with this idea of human rights.
Right, that comes from that moral code.
It comes from laws and legislation and humans. Like it doesn't just appear out of thin air. Mm-hmm. We have to come together via law and legislation and unity and collaboration to intellectually come together and put our minds together to say what is human rights. Right. And I think it's really interesting how he's bringing this up as the recovery atheist and understanding that morality, really, it's more of a natural born tendency that we have from within to feel the difference between right and wrong and know that it's not right to just go out and pillage and rape and murder and do things that are extreme.
And again, it comes down to where Christians are not going to want to hear this, but it's a humanistic view. When it comes to morality, we're being humanistic. In fact, when I was looking and investigating into this, what seemed to be coming up all the time is a thing called secular humanism, which just means using things in our environment in the world today and using them toward ways to help others and look at it from a humanistic point of view. Not in not in a religious fashion, but just normal things that we deal day in and day out without a religious overtone involved. So that can be many charities that are out there that are helping people that are based off of individuals and businesses and places of that nature and not of the religious sect. So I have a new way of calling myself. I am a secular humanist. That is what I'm looking to do. I am looking to use the resources that I have in my day-to-day life to be able to help others and be able to create a better place to live. And I do not need a God for that morality to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting once you dive into what morality comes from, and then when you look into whether it's natural or if it's learned behavior or if it's a natural behavior we are born with. And for me, naturally, since I was born and I was raised, I think I've learned from the people around me and from natural instinct to behave and act within the way I do. So I think it has a lot to do with my environment growing up, and then also my natural born instincts and understandings that naturally, as a human, I want to make other people feel good about themselves. I want to help build people up. I want to naturally do good in my life, especially once I got older. Now I'm in business. I naturally want to help build people up and help bring people with me, see people smile, see people happy, see people fulfilled. Naturally, I don't like seeing people depressed, sad, angry, lonely.
Right.
And it just hurts me to see it, especially when you're a human and you've been through that dark time.
Mm-hmm.
The more you've been through dark times and pain and suffering, the less you really want to see it.
Right. I mean, we have a natural instinct. I mean, and we talked about this, unless you're a psychopath or a sociopath, you've got some kind of a mental health condition that's
unless you're an extreme outlier.
Exactly, to that condition. I can see something that's happening in front of me and reason and logic in that and have instinct inside of me telling me it's right or if it's wrong.
Which is the definition of instinct, right?
Right. I don't need, you look at the definitions of it, it says instinct is a natural or inherent aptitude, impulse, or capacity. It's a largely inheritable and unalterable tendency of an organism to make a complex and specific response to its environmental stimuli without involving reason. So it just comes naturally. And a behavior that is mediated by reactions below the conscious level. So these are reactions and decisions that we're making that are not even, in the conscious level. They just, inside, we have that working, that connection in the brain that says, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. And we make a reaction to it off that. Now, Christians will go to the point of, well, God instilled that into us. They'll say that with no evidence for that. None whatsoever. I look at it as, what about the animals?
Exactly.
The
animals naturally.
Right. The animals naturally do the same thing of right and wrong. They do. And they're not... I'm not saying they're not intelligent. The dolphin is probably smarter than some people that walk around on this planet. But they are not as sophisticated. But at the same time, I look at it as, just because I can't speak dolphin doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. I also can't speak German or French or any of that and understand what they're saying. If I could speak dolphin, I probably would understand and probably find out they're pretty intelligent. But the thing is they have the instincts too. So why do we automatically think that God is the reason for it? And again, it comes down to it. Religion says God created the animals and we're considered an animal as a human. So he put that instinct in us. The atheist or the non-believer of that would say it's just naturally in us when we are born. What are your thoughts?
I think it's 100% natural born, but I think the environmental stimuli key words in that definition are important, because I feel like a lot of what I have absorbed and what I have learned and the behaviors I've absorbed and the tendencies I have come from the environment from which I grew up in. So I think it has a lot to do with natural instincts that we are born with as humans, and I think we naturally as humans are born to do good, and I really believe that. And I really think that the environment that you're raised within is a big part of that. But to me, it's just really interesting how you can look at it's all about law. To me, law and legislation is really what pushes morality. If you think about it, what more than laws that say if you don't do this or you do it, you go to jail? So that's, to me, law and legislation is the ultimate pinnacle example of morality. And if you think about it, we as humans, through fictional stories, we at some point came together and said, oh, we have to have government and law and legislation to help govern morality, because obviously there's a ton of people that are just completely irradical with their thoughts and their actions, and they need law and legislation to guide them, because obviously there's some people that just don't get it, and they think and they just think that you don't have to have morality, or that they can egotistically do whatever they want and be above the law. So I think it's really interesting when you start to see the whole picture, and religion is obviously a huge part of this conversation.
Well, and I'll go with two thoughts on that. You talked about the environmental part of it, and you're absolutely right. There can be a conditioning that happens. Yeah. So if you go home from school every day growing up as a kid and you see your dad going through a 12-pack of beer every day,
exactly,
you're going to sit there and look at it and think that's a natural thing, that's okay, that there's not a moral issue with that. And as you grow up, it can taint or it can give you a cognitive dysfunction or a delusion to that and think that that's okay. If your dad was beating your mom the entire time,
exactly, great example.
That can as well make an effect on your instinct as you become older, and all of a sudden, it also says in the first definition of it that it's an impulse. Mm-hmm. Sometimes our impulses are wrong.
100%.
So naturally, that impulse of what we've seen and what we've been conditioned to see can have an effect on that. The other thing I want to point out is this. You talked about the jails. You talked about our system that we have for being able to
law and legislation,
dealing with morality and everything like that. Before the Bible and before any of that was in place, they already had those. They had jails. They had punishments for things. They had morals. You hear all the time that the Christians will say that it's the Ten Commandments that brought across the morals of that. But the truth is before the Ten Commandments were even written, Moses killed a slave taskmaster for beating a slave and looked around to see if he was seen, and then tried to hide the body because he knew it was wrong. And that was way before the Ten Commandments was even done. So he knew it was wrong. There was morals before the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, we naturally as humans have them. I just think it's interesting how once you start to get societies together and mass amounts of people together, that you start to look at basically our laws and legislation are implemented to help remove the impulses and punish people that behave in an impulsive manner. So it's interesting when you think about this, because anger we talked about earlier, and you impulsively via anger could make all kinds of erratic decisions. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting when you brought up that word impulse, because the more that we gain a capacity to not be impulsive and a capacity to be more moral in our actions and a capacity to care about other people and a capacity to be open-minded and humble and like all these things that we talk about all the time, it kind of correlates with all of this and understanding that. And to me, I feel like religion is just the ultimate level of saying we have the power, we choose right and wrong, we tell you you're wrong, we tell you you're right, and that's all comes down to how loyal you are to the church, how much money you give the church, and how much of a church supporter you are. I just think everything about religion and religious doctrine to me, I have an issue with, because I personally think there's a direct correlation between religious doctrine and religion and money. Like, if it wasn't about money, there's just so many things that they are doing backwards to me, as opposed to being about the people and being about the true, like, factors of helping other people. They wouldn't sit with empty churches. Like, the Catholic land is one of the largest landholders. The Catholic Church is one of the largest landholders in the world. I don't think that they would be sitting with those churches empty at night when people sleep on the streets if they were really about the people. Like, why not have cots and roll out mats for people? And I just think it's really interesting how they have so much land, they have so much influence, they have so much power. And if they're really about morality, how come we have people sleeping on the streets so much? And there is a certain extent of that it's uncontrollable with poverty and people that choose that life. But man, I just find it really interesting once you start diving into these things to look at how, and then just understanding that a lot of this is a byproduct of us as humans, like law and legislation and human rights and religion and our government and money. All of these things we've created. It's really interesting to dive deeper into this stuff. Right,
and I mean, you talked about impulses. It's natural for us as humans to sometimes have a cognitive dysfunction, a delusion. And so in some situations we might have a fear that happens, or we see something that causes us to have an impulse that we think it's natural instinct to react that way. Sometimes it's not right. We are human, we make mistakes. But what we're trying to do within that morality code is be able to make the right decisions on the information that we have, and when we do make a mistake, be able to learn from it and adjust that morality according to what is right when it comes to the world and the humanistic point of view.
So this is really interesting. Let's weave this into current events now, Del, because this is interesting. Yeah. I want to hear your take on this. So is it morally right or wrong when millions of people in America lose their jobs because of no control of their own, say they flip the switch and shut everything down because there's a pandemic, like they did, and then everyone loses their jobs, and it's essentially on a fabricated and manufactured recession because we chose to flip the switch, which I'm not saying we shouldn't have, but we chose to. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So by doing that, millions of people are now losing their jobs, and they're now sitting at home with very little or next to no money, and they don't have jobs to go get or attain because there's less jobs, there's less work, and there's pandemic occurring. Right. So is it moral or immoral to not provide them with unemployment insurance that's extended? So these are kind of things that I think are really interesting. So because it correlates to today even.
You look at the government with them trying to cut off the unemployment help, and they're fighting for the stimulus checks and everything like that. It is not of any fault to these people that were in the middle of a pandemic, but yet it's like the government's like, well, so what? You're on your own.
So that's what I find really interesting, the topic of morality of our government officials, and they're the ones that are implementing the laws and legislation.
And these are the same people that get to go home to their beautiful homes and families and have beautiful cars to go home. And I can guarantee you the people that are in government, they're not suffering right now. They're not.
So I find that interesting, that topic, because you're looking at the rigid bureaucracy that our government has, and it correlates with everything that you talk about, and I find it really interesting because ultimately, to me, it's immoral to not take care of the people that are impacted by this, because they had no power or no control or no say whatsoever over whether or not there was a pandemic and if we shut the country down. Correct. And now these people are at home, and a lot of them might be evicted or go homeless, and they don't have a job, and they have kind of a powerless state over this, and the government is sitting there playing politics, and it's about the red party, it's about the blue party, instead of just being, okay, how can we get these people what they need on a morality level. It's just really interesting to me how we have one, and then you talk about people that they have plenty of money and they're living plush. Yeah, exactly. So we have these 1%ers that are drafting. It's just interesting. It seems like we have people that are in the law and legislation that are disconnected and have a discord from reality. They're not blue-collar people. It's just interesting to me.
Well, it's so funny. A lot of people will say that this country was built on God. But really, when it comes down to it, our government right now is playing God.
In a way, in many ways.
Yeah, so they make the decisions on pretty much who lives, who dies, who gets help, who doesn't get help, and we're kind of at a loss. We're kind of sitting back going, okay, when is this going to happen? And we're crying out for help, and they're up on their hill there, and literally, capital
literally,
and just shuffling their feet.
Playing King of the Hill.
Yeah, playing, we're in power and we'll get to it when we get to it. While that's happening, people are losing their homes, they're losing their cars, they're losing education for their families. You talked about it earlier, the colleges are charging more now.
Another great point. If that's not moral.
Because of the online courses now that they're having to do, instead of being able to go into the campuses, the universities are charging more. It's going to have an economic impact. It already has, but it's going to have even more of an economic impact over this time. And I don't see any end to this anytime soon. I don't see any end to the masks. I don't see any end to the COVID that's going on. In fact, even though it is of the 1% that are dying, we're still getting more and more cases every day. Of course, some of that is we're testing more. Wisconsin finally hit 1 million people tested.
Totally. But I just find it interesting connecting morality to all of this, because really what you're talking about is morality and human rights, and I think it's really interesting to go full circle with it, and how, it, like you just said, it connects back to everything. You talked about it connecting to education. Is it moral to charge for education, or even charge more for education? That is going to be, so yeah, I just find it really interesting how really the people that have the most power over morality are the people that have power legislatively, because they're the ones that can implement rules and laws and regulations that say, oh, this isn't moral or this is moral.
Well, and we're going to, I have it on my list of different topics for our podcast, but we're definitely going to have one where we're dealing with college, where we're dealing with the loans and how, a lot of people feel that college should be free. In certain countries, it is set up that way. That if you meet a certain criteria when it comes to your educational level, your grades, things of that nature, that you're able to get it a free ride for that. Of course, taxes pay for it by everybody, but so it's not necessarily a free ride.
Yeah.
But still, like I said with me, $36,000 a year is the most I ever made, and I'm still sitting on $90,000 in loans. So the rest of my life, I've got this burden that's over my head. And I don't get federal tax returns anymore because I haven't been able to pay it. They want $900 a month. That's a mortgage payment for some homes, and they want me to pay that every single month, and I can't do it. So it's in default, and so now the federal government is just seizing my tax returns. So it's
brutal.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. I already pay taxes as it is. And I pay more taxes in than what I need to, and they're still continually to take my money. It's like the poor keep getting poor, and the rich find ways to keep filling their pockets.
So that's interesting how you look at that based on what we're talking about. The environment that we grow up in, and then the government of our society, that has a large impact on the morality. And then you sprinkle in religion, and man, it starts to get really kind of confusing.
Yeah,
It gets really confusing.
I don't know how people can afford living in religion. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know how my mom and dad have done it. They have pastored a church for 40 years, off and on in different churches in different states. And my dad, the biggest membership he's ever had is 33 people. Now, he lives pretty much off the tithes, the 10% that his members are giving to him, and part of that goes into the church expense and everything like that. Somehow they have worked jobs and everything, but they have found a way to get by. But look at some of these people that are trying to have a family, trying to have a home, trying to have life in general, and they're giving their money to the church as well, and their time. A lot of them spend a lot of time. I just don't know how people do it. Like, I'm so busy with what I have going on and everything. Like, this is my church, okay? What I'm doing here right now, for a Christian, they'd be doing church time, okay? This is mine. I honestly don't know how they are able to invest so much time and money into it without having stress financially, spiritually, and also just self-care in general.
The thing that I find interesting about religion and everything that you talk about is that I think number one is that the majority of the people in the world are fearful of death. And if you think about it, it's kind of the most irrational thing to fear. Because think about it, Del. One of the things that's most guaranteed outside of taxes is death. So if you think about it,
it's guaranteed.
Death is guaranteed. So like if I'm going to sit here and fear something that's guaranteed to happen, it's coming, and I'm going to fear it, and then like there's no such thing as an accident when death comes, because once you're dead. There's nothing else that can happen to you. Mm-hmm. So like I just find it really interesting that for me, I think my lack of fear of death and my mom dying at a young age helped me, because it forces me now to really live in the moment and live fully, because I don't fear dying. And I really feel like a lot of people, if they stop living fear-driven lives, I really feel like that would stop the religious doctrine from being so powerful. I really feel like a lot of the religious doctrine power comes from a fear-driven society, where if people started to wake up a little bit maybe and have a little bit more awareness and perspective, they wouldn't be so fear-driven and in turn driven to the churches. I just feel like it's such a rigid, old way of thinking, and moving forward, I really see it stopping. You already see it. I mean, Catholic churches are less and less filled up, and their membership, I believe, continues to drop.
Well, yeah, when it comes to the Christian faith, their memberships are dropping each year. And in fact, the Islamic faith is the fastest growing
That's interesting.
religion that there is on the planet.
Islamic.
Yes. So I don't know. I guess I look at it as, like you said, what are we truly investing in? Because when it comes to death and God and everything like that, I agree with you completely that I think a lot of people are in fear of death, and then that the struggles and everything that they go through here in this life, there has to be a meaning for it. There has to be a reason why we're going through it. So they go, oh, it's to give us the reward at the end of it to go to heaven or have an afterlife, whatever that represents for you.
Yeah, they're seeking an answer.
So instead of just enjoying the idea of existing and being alive for how many years that you're living, instead they sit there for years and years and fear that coming. The truth is when it comes to me, I don't fear death. That's an honest truth. It's going to happen. If I'm not getting up every day and going out and living it like to the fullest, I don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly. That's what I fear. When people ask me my biggest fear, that's my biggest fear. That I live a life.
I don't want to get to my deathbed and be like, Del, why didn't you do this?
Exactly. I fear not living, and I also fear not living up to my potential.
Right.
I fear looking back and be like, damn.
Wasting time like I have with my alcoholism.
To me, regret. Exactly. That's the number one poison, I think, in life is regret. So as long as when I'm done, I don't have regret, I say, okay, I did swing. Okay, I did try. I did live. I traveled.
Right.
Even if it wasn't perfect, I just want to be able to say I lived and I tried and I gave it my all and I tried. Like, I just can't look back and say I regret. That's my biggest thing.
Right.
That's what I fear more than anything. And I agree with you. It's interesting because I'm the same way. I fear that more than I do death. I fear living a life that's not worthy or living a life that I don't really fulfill myself.
Well, and a lot of people, Christians, will be like, well, what about Pascal's wager of, well, why don't you just believe in it, or do the best you can with it, so that way when you get to the end, if there is something, then you're part of it. If there's not, then it doesn't matter anyway. Well, I look at this as you're saying God is that stupid? If there truly is a God who's omnipresent, all-seeing, all-knowing, all of that, he knows that you're lying. He knows that you truly don't believe in it and that you're just faking it until you make it. Wouldn't he look at that and say that you're just lying to him with Pascal's wager? I that's just my opinion on it.
What is Pascal's wager?
Pascal's wager is might as well do something. Here, I'll look it up, but might as well do something in case you could be wrong at the end. So in other words, why don't you
try? Yeah, so like you might as well do it now.
Might as well just be a Christian even though you truly don't believe in it, because when you get to the end, if it is true,
you're right.
Then you're right, and if it's not true, well, what's it matter anyway? You don't exist anymore anyway. I'm not going to believe that way. I just think it's an insult if there is a God. I think it's an insult to his intelligence.
Yeah, I just really think that since I was a younger age and I've lived my life based on my journey and experience, I really feel like religious doctrine is to manipulate people that are fearful.
Correct.
I've watched the Book of Eli. It's one of my favorite books, and it's proof. When times are dark, people are fearful. When people are awake and intelligent and aware, they're not easily manipulated. People are more manipulated than ever before. And if you think about how old religious doctrine is, it makes sense. Because back in the days when people lacked education, awareness, and perspective and insight, back when religion began, just think about how old it is and how rigid it is. Religious doctrine is one of the most rigid, bureaucratic. It's one of the oldest forms of rigid bureaucracy and rigid form. Like, it's so old. Religion is one of the oldest things in the world, and it makes sense because it was started. It makes sense if you look at it like this, to manipulate people that lack education and perspective. Picture back in the beginning of societies and nations, when people needed to have control of their people, and they wanted to use religious doctrine to get them to follow them or give them money. And now people are becoming more educated and awake and aware, and it's harder to do because that makes sense. Once I'm awake and aware, I'm not just going to blindly give you my money. Like, imagine if a monkey told another monkey if he gives him bananas, he goes to heaven at the end of his life. That makes no sense. Monkeys wouldn't do it.
That makes no sense.
We're the only humans that have. We're one of the only species and animals that can tell a story and get other humans to believe it.
Manipulate them.
So it's interesting, once you read about human species, we're one of the only species that can communicate, we use our communication to communicate our reality, but we also can tell news stories that other people believe, and in turn, they follow us or believe us. And to me, religion is about getting people to follow you and give you their money for like personal gain.
All right, so when it comes to Pascal's wager, it's an argument that a philosopher brought up in 17th century France, back in 1600s. But it's like a human bet with their lives that God either exists or does not. So what he argues is that a rational person should live as though God exists and seek to believe in God. If God does not actually exist, such a person will have only a finite loss, some pleasures and luxuries that they lose. Whereas if God does exist, he stands to receive infinite gains, like an eternity in heaven, and avoid infinite losses, eternity in hell.
That sounds like a complete reason to not believe. Listen to the end.
It makes no sense to me.
You're saying God's going to send... Fuck. I'm already saying fuck it. Because listen, if there's someone up there that has a gavel that's sending people to hell because they're not worthy, he can bite the bullet. I don't want to be around him. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right, no,
that makes no sense to me. That gives me all the... To me, that completely says why you shouldn't believe it. Like, I'm not going to believe in something just to believe in it because I think I'll be rewarded, or because I'll have luxuries or pleasures in heaven because I followed him. That's bullshit.
If there was a God, it's a complete insult to him.
I know, it's saying that he's going to... I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a complete insult. It's saying that, I'm only doing it because I want what the payoff is in the end. Otherwise, I don't really give a shit about you.
It makes no sense.
So that's so selfish. That's so...
It's so
arrogant
and contradicting
and egotistical to sit there and go, I'm only going to be a part of it and help you as long as I get the payoff. How does that make sense? I will never, ever believe in this wager. I will never, ever believe in a God because I'm afraid of what's possibly going to happen in the afterlife that way. I'm sorry. I'm going to use my logical thinking, my reasoning, and what is real to me, my evidence that I see in the world, and that is not part of it.
And to me, when we talk about morality, to help us to maybe wrap this up, we'll come with another episode probably, but judgment and morality. So let's just connect this last thing I want to say. Judgment and morality. How in any way is that moral? That there's going to be a God on Judgment Day that swings the gavel that says this guy goes to hell, this guy goes to heaven. That's basically like saying the most immoral thing is God. That's saying that God is one of the most immoral people in the world, that he's judging people and he's egotistically separating people based on how they behaved and how they acted, saying you're worthy, you're not worthy, I'm the one that decides. That's saying that I'm egotistically the best and I know right and wrong and I know what's right for everyone. That just makes no sense to me, and to me is completely immoral because everyone's imperfect, everyone makes mistakes. Who's going to swing the gavel and say this guy goes to hell, this guy goes to jail, this guy goes to prison, he goes down there, and these people go up here and they go to heaven? To me, it completely contradicts religion, and it completely contradicts morality, and it's completely judging, it's judgmental, it's egotistical, and it's contradicting.
Even though it says in the Bible, judge ye not, lest ye be judged. When it comes down to it, literally, this is how I look at it. Why... Okay, first off, you can say that you know what God believes in and what his judgments are. You don't know.
No one knows.
No one knows. If there is a God, and I don't believe there is...
And then they read all these...
They're getting their laws and their rules and what God is going to judge off of a book that was written thousands of years ago.
It was written... It's a fictional story.
By ignorant, unsophisticated, uneducated individuals that... are passing it down to where the translations now are so muddy from the original text. It's like that whole thing, what is it called, the phone call thing, or where you tell a story to someone, they pass it to the next one, you go around the circle, and by the time it's done, it's a completely different story than what it is. I am sorry, I'm not going to believe in something that has no basis for me in my life as being truth.
And it's so interesting how many people take it as factual. But let's face it.
Oh, it's a historical document.
Let's look at the piece. Let's look at the book. The only thing that gives any piece of documentation or anything truth is if you believe it. It's a book. It was created by someone. It's a fictional story. Period. Anything that... And me and Del can write something today, and that's There's hundreds of books out there, hundreds. The only thing that gives something truth is if you believe it. If you believe it. So there's nothing factual about religion. It's all fictional.
Faith.
You choose if you believe it.
It's all on a faith base.
You choose if you believe that.
Well, and Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, all the big-time atheists, each one of them have said what I'm about ready to say here. And that is, when it comes down to it, with the Bible and the historical documents that are written, that if you're going to believe in that... Oh, I lost my train of thought. Don't you hate that when that happens, Podcast Nation? I had a good thought, and I was thinking about what you just said. Continue. I'll get it back.
Well, basically, what I want to emphasize again is that most people don't realize this, that every single story, there's books out there at Barnes & Noble that are classified as fictional and non-fictional.
Right.
Real and not real. But truly, every single story that we hear or I tell you, it's my perspective and it's your perspective. If Del Bacon writes a book, that's his book, that's his documentation, that's his perspective.
You brought it back up.
So back then, whenever these events occurred hundreds and thousands of years ago, whenever these people claimed to be factual, they observed them and they wrote down their stories. That is a fictional story. That was their perspective. That's what they saw.
If it was written today, it would be in the fiction category of the library.
It's a fictional story.
But it's in the nonfiction. If you go to the library, it's under religious nonfiction.
It makes no sense. Every single story that's ever told to you, start to realize this, is a fictional story. The only thing that gives it truth is how powerful it's told to you and how truthful it is.
And
how much
you give it truth.
And how much qualitative and quantitative evidence behind it supports it. So if there's qualitative and quantitative supporting evidence behind the story and this person shares it in a powerful, authentic fashion, people tend to believe it. But religion is fictional. Don't buy the bullshit.
Here's my final thought on this. I thought of what I was going to say. Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, each one of them, and all atheists will say this, is that book, the Holy Bible, any of us could sit down and take out certain spots in it and write better things in that book, and that book would already be better.
Exactly.
We could take out so much stuff out of that book and write other things in that book, and that book would be 100% better than what it's trying to sell us in the original text. So when it comes to morality of it, is it truly moral, that book that you're reading, that you're believing in? Really investigate it and look into it. My mom, when I talk to her about it, and I talk about the slavery and if you want a woman, just go ahead and rape her, and then you can pay her father 60 shekels of gold and be able to keep her and hold on to her for the rest of her life until you release her. This is all stuff you believe in, Mom, and she couldn't come up with an answer. You know, I mean, the morality of that book is that the reality, not morality, the reality of that book is it's not moral. It's not. And you cannot sell that to me that book is moral. It's not.
So I think it's really interesting. I'm going to wrap my end up. I'm just going to say the power of fictional story is never more evident than when you look at religion. Religion, if you look at it, is a fictional story that people have believed in and believed in and believed in and believed in and believed in for years. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. But to me, it is one of the all-time examples of immorality. It's immoral. It's not moral to me. Because to me, it's judging, it's dividing, it's unicive. So it's not uniting. It's not like uniform. It's not like it's dividing more than it is uniting. And to me, something that judges other people or says you go to heaven, you go to hell, that is to me immoral. That is not open-minded, that is not uniting. And then all the different counts of religious forms, all the countless different varieties of it, to me, it contradicts themselves, because by having all these different forms of religion, it says we don't know what we believe in. We have all these varieties, but we know we want to believe in something because we don't know what to believe in. We don't have that guidance, direction, purpose, or awareness or insight. So I think
it's all based on fear that way.
So yeah, exactly. And when people are living in fear, they make impulsive, uneducated, lacking awareness decisions. If I'm living in fear, like the majority of people that are living in fear, I make impulsive, immoral decisions. Like if you want to start making better decisions, you have to start living in an awakened, aware, intellectually a woke type of way. So like,
Right.
I just find it interesting how many people are living fearfully who let the power of fictional stories like religion and so forth dictate what they do with their time and energy as well as their money. So it's really interesting, and I think to me religion is the ultimate example of immoral fictional stories.
All right, so I'm going to close it out
Yep.
here and do my thing, but I just want to say one thing when it comes to it. It says in the Bible that God is not a God of fear. There's a contradiction there. It also says God is a God of peace, but then in one scripture it says God is a God of war. So there's so many contradictions with it that I can't believe in something of that nature. If you like the content that you're watching right now, listening to, please be able to find me on YouTube, the Recovery Atheist, and subscribe to me. I'm also on Instagram and on Twitter under the Recovery Atheist. And then also you can email me at therecoveryatheist@gmail.com. Facebook, Del Bacon, Recovery Atheist Group on Facebook. Get a hold of me. Let me know your thoughts, good or bad. Bring it on. On to you, JR.
Yeah, just once again, thanks for tuning in. We love any kind of feedback, insight, or direction, like Del said. And once again, we're live here at the Wierman Media Studios, and your attention is our oxygen. So once again, thanks for tuning in.
Smell that oxygen?
Morality.
Morality.
Interesting. Religion.